Welcome to Human Skills Project, where I talk with my very, very good friend Ted Meridian. Um, I came to Canada about 10 years ago, and Ted became my first friend. And I would say that a lifelong confidant. Ted and I are from a bit different generation, but he's one of the few people in my life that I can engage in the deepest conversation, ask some of the most genuine questions. Ted and I also come from different vantage points when in our conversation. I'm a academic. I am a doctoral researcher. I have gone through different stages in my life. I was born and raised in Bangladesh in a small village, and obviously, my journey from Bangladesh to Canada has taken me through so many episodes of understanding the world. So, my doctoral research now looks into how we believe anything that we believe. So, in other words, we are in a very difficult time in our human history that the world is heating up, warming up, climate change is happening. We have gone through pandemic. So, should you take a vaccine? Um, do you believe that the climate is changing? So these are some of the big questions that I think about. But my research is not so much about science, but how people believe anything. What's the social process of believing science? That's my research. So I'm from a standpoint where I use the Latin saying that nullius in verba, which is examine everything that you believe. That's my point of view. So Ted is an amazing storyteller. I really admire and not envy. I mean, I admire his sense of humor. That how he can crack jokes. Particularly, my sense of humor is not good. So this series of conversation is going to be very storytelling conversation between two friends who comes at life skills project conversation from two vantage point. I come from academia and I am agnostic. I question everything. And Ted also comes from academia, but Ted has a lot of life experiences, a lot of skills of managing conflict. So, Ted, people who don't know you, who are hearing this podcast, a video podcast for the first time, how would you introduce them? How would you introduce yourself and your work to them?
The When I'm introduced on radio that I do and other things, it's I'm president of the 2% Factor. That's my company. I'm an
Mhm,
author. I've written 4 books,
mhm,
and I'm also a professional speaker. I've keynoted around the world, and our currently our company is in 7 countries with
mhm,
our videos and our online training. But I'm also a man who's lived 2 lives, and that's the story, I
mhm,
guess, of my life.
mhm,
I was married young at night. I met my wife at 19, got engaged at 20, got married at 20, because that's what you did back then. By the way, I'm
mhm.
75 years old. I was born in 1948. And what I like about you, Feroz, is that you streak your hair grayer than I streak mine, and which is good. And but so I lived 2 separate lives because our marriage was a good marriage, a really good marriage, until I realized partway through our marriage that I'd rather be with men than women. And we 20 years after our marriage, we divorced. We have 2 wonderful daughters, 2 great grandchildren. And the thing is then I realized, because again, what your premise about what do we believe and why do we believe
Mhm,
it?
mhm,
I was brought up as a jock, a male, in the patriarchal society in the 1950s and 60s, that I couldn't hug, I couldn't cry, I couldn't show weakness, I couldn't do anything like that until I found true self.
mhm,
I realized that, yeah, I can be hard, stern, male, blah, 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 as well as being soft, sensitive, caring, and thinking about other people. And
mhm,
that's when I decided in my mid 40s to go to university and get a degree in sociology. And that's where I developed my current theory, the law of cooperative action.
mhm,
And I'm sure we're going to go through different
mhm,
phases of that.
mhm,
But I can't even get really upset with people who are that bully patriarchal 2%, because again, that's what they were brought up to believe is the only way they can be.
Hmm.
And so I'm like you, study human beings.
Hmm.
I just think we're fascinating. I mean, this world works. Everything works. We screw it up. We totally screw it up. And that's the study that I've been doing with my model. And I appreciate your opening words. And yeah, I saw you walking around like a deer in headlights that first day when we were near the cafe there, and I thought, okay, this guy looks lost. Um, and I again, we just started our conversation, and from then it grew. And
Hmm.
I really appreciate, you've really taught me a lot, by the way, as well as I know I've taught you a lot, right?
Yeah.
Again, perspective.
Mhm. Right. So, in terms of what he just said, that you can get upset at a bully, you can get upset at a person who believes a certain ways of world. One of the very profound realization of human condition came from a man who had a lot of power, a lot of influence, Marcus Aurelius. He was a Roman emperor and he was a philosopher. He has written a book that has influenced so many great minds in the world. It's called Meditation. There he says, everything that we experience, whether you're happy or not, it all depends on how you think. So he is literally focusing our entire state of mental being on our patterns of thinking. You taught me a long time ago that humans go through three episodes. Some people, they are unconsciously incompetent. Four,
Actually,
you
there are
said?
four. There are four.
Four?
Yeah.
Okay. So, what are the four stages of people's consciousness?
Well, it's unconscious incompetent,
Mm-hmm.
conscious incompetent,
Mm-hmm.
conscious competent,
Mm-hmm.
and then unconscious competent.
Okay.
That's the fourth
Okay.
one.
Mm-hmm.
And so the point is, and the example is, I can take as a man's beating his wife
Mm-hmm.
or his children
Mm-hmm.
and believes he's right.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of bullies and a lot of authoritarians, and they honestly believe they're right.
Mm-hmm.
They don't see anything wrong with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then through a little knowledge and stuff, that's unconscious incompetent. Then through a
Mm-hmm.
little knowledge, they move to conscious incompetent.
Mm-hmm.
They're still beating their wife,
Mm-hmm.
but now they know it's wrong, but they can't stop it. Like an alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
An unconscious incompetent alcoholic believes there's nothing wrong with me. I'm not an alcoholic. I can
Mm-hmm.
handle it.
Mm-hmm.
A conscious incompetent
Mm-hmm.
knows they're an alcoholic but can't
Mm-hmm.
stop.
Mm-hmm.
So then through something life changing,
Mm-hmm.
they come to the point where they realize, they understand, and they know
Mm-hmm.
that what they're doing is not only harming themselves, but harming their others and harming the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Then they become a conscious competent.
Mm-hmm.
Just before they go to throw the punch, they say, I don't do that anymore. Just before they go to take that drink, I
Mm-hmm.
don't do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
What we hope, and and not many people can reach this goal, is that they become an unconscious competent,
Mm-hmm.
where they don't even think about
Mm-hmm.
throwing a punch anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They don't even think about taking a drink anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I can personalize this in a way. I was brought up in a family that we fought a lot. And I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't say we were very violent, but we were. I mean, we yelled and screamed at each other. I was a street fighter. I could get so angry I could punch a door in. At the time I was at that level, I was an unconscious incompetent. I was a two percenter. I was one that, this is the way it is, and the world is. And then I started realizing that's not a way to live. That's not a good way to live. And
Mm-hmm.
as I got a little more aware and a little more self-aware, a little more aware, reading, meditating, all of those sorts of things, questioning, as you say, everything.
Mhm.
Why do I have to be like this? Why do I do that? I moved on and on and on. And right now, I'd say most of the time I'm up in the unconscious competent level. Now, once in a
Mhm.
while, I slip down. A two percenter or a bully, let's keep those two, they will never ever move out of the unconscious incompetent.
Mhm.
They haven't
Mhm.
got the ability. Now,
Mhm.
people who exhibit that can move up and out, but
Mhm.
some will never move out.
Right. What is it? What you just said, um, and particularly asking question. Um, Baruch Spinoza is considered to be one of the noblest of philosopher. Einstein was once asked that, "Do you believe in God?" And Einstein replied, "I believe in Spinoza's God." Barton Russell called Spinoza that the noblest of all philosophers. What he just said, Spinoza described it this way: that we have two kinds of emotion. One is passive emotion, and the other one is active emotion. Passive emotion, he describes emotions that pretty much everybody has. You don't really have to think about it. For example, anger, rage, hatred, jealousy, all of that. Baruch Spinoza, in his one of the greatest book in the history of humanity, Ethics, he talks about that. Why is it important to understand what you're saying? It has been said in philosophy. So Spinoza is saying this, that Spinoza is committing to this, not to ridicule, not to laugh, not to hate, not to jeer at people, but only and only to understand. Only and only to understand. So what happens is that only through understanding we develop compassion.
Now,
Mm.
in the understanding, that's part of my model, in the
Right.
understanding of people and celebrating their right, tenant one, celebrating their right to be who they are, no matter who they are, even if
Mhm.
they're the stupidest, idiotic people in the world, and even if they want to kill themselves with alcohol,
Mm.
that's who they are,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
So you can't change that. You can't hit, but you can also, you have the choice of whether or not you associate with them or not. That's the
Yeah,
other.
that's true. Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true that we have a choice. Um, in terms of two kinds of competence that you just said, that unconscious and conscious, and then that becomes unconscious. So what you just said, when you were a high school student, things that you knew, you had to question. You had to question. Now, that questioning, Spinoza would say, is the active emotion.
Okay.
Spinoza, because you actively reflect, this is a conscious process. It's not an unconscious process. I mean, we're all born human. It sounds, I don't know how politically correct it is. Um, you all grow up. Sorry, we all grow old, but not everybody grows up.
That's right. No, that's a truism. And some of us, my friends have said, I'm even though I'm old chronologically,
Mhm.
I'm about 19
Mhm.
mentally because I do TED. And I think
Yeah.
that's one of the keys of what I try to
Mhm.
teach people
Mhm.
is do you.
Mhm.
Do
What does it
entirely.
mean, Ted? Do ye? What does it mean?
Well, for example, we're so hung up on what
Mhm.
other people think of us.
Mhm.
And I'll bring the 2% in because I mentioned it with my company. The 2% factor is there's a group of people that have been put on the planet to totally screw with us, to mess with our heads. This is Uncle Louie who comes over at Christmas and messes with everybody and ruins the set. So instead of getting mad at Uncle Louie,
Mhm.
right, we have to learn how to neutralize how Uncle Louie affects us.
Mhm.
But I went to Niagara Regional, the police, and I said, "What's the percentage of society that'll pick up a gun and shoot you no matter what the rules are?" And they said about 2%.
Mhm.
And the story goes, there's a psychiatrist who works for the UN. We've done a couple of contracts with the UN,
Mhm.
and he got onto our website, and
Mhm.
eventually we talked. And he said, "Ted, your 2% factor is bang on." And I don't
Mhm.
know what research you have to support this or not, but
Mhm.
this is what he said as a
Mhm.
psychiatrist. He
Mhm.
said, "Women are 1% crazy, men are 3% crazy,
Mhm.
hence I had no idea at the time that my 2% was based in there. Now, what we can't do is get hung up on the exact 2%.
Hmm.
What the concept is there's this who are the crazy ones, and the rest of us are okay. Sometimes those crazy ones influence some of the rest of us, which is part of your research, influences some of the rest of us to become crazy people as well. Our problem is they run our entire planet. And I'm getting around to what the question is, but we run our entire planet. Kindergarten teachers can't have their kids because 2% molest. You won't pick somebody on the side of the road because 2% mug. We go through the beepy things in the store because 2% steal. If you wear, this is male, female, it doesn't matter. You'll wear an outfit, 1,000 people will see you in that outfit. One person will come up to you and say, you know, you're looking fat in that, you'll throw it away. Or at least you'll think about it. So the concept of doing TED, and what I try to teach people is 98% of the people out there don't care about TED. Don't care what Ted's wearing, don't care who Ted loves, don't care, you know, that Ted might have his toenail painted, don't care whether Feroz's hair is really long and great. It doesn't matter. It's the 2% that will criticize, try to change, and try to control you. And we can get into all the psychology on why they become 2%, of course, and I'm sure we will over a period of our discussions. But they're the ones who are totally the disruptors. And I don't mean the disruptors in a good way, because there are good disruptors and bad disruptors, right? So when I say I do TED, I do my best just to do TED. Now, tenet number 2 of the model says, you know, anybody can do anything they want as long as they don't knowingly adversely affect the planet or anyone on it. So while I'm doing TED, I've got to be conscious of everything else. Just like in indigenous, I think in some indigenous, they think 7 generations ahead before they do something. So when you are doing something, when I am trying to be TED, I do my best not to harm. Example, when my oldest daughter was getting married, I wear flip flops all the time. You know that. I hate shoes. I don't wear socks all year round. But I do have a tuxedo. And so when my daughter was getting married, she said, Dad, you know, you're not going to wear flip flops to my wedding. And it was funny because I smiled and she said, and I said, well, of course not. Because here's the thing, doing TED means that I can do whatever I want because I'm Ted. But also, tenet number 2, I know that would harm my daughter. I know that would make her wonderful day uncomfortable. So of course I won't. And that gets to tenet 4. You always look for a balance and equilibrium to create cooperative action without losing sense of self. So tenet number 4 means if I can, I will. So when my daughter said, Dad, don't wear flip-flops with your tuxedo, of course not. That would be rude. That would be disrespecting my daughter's day. But if someone said to me in a work situation, because I wear flip-flops when I do my keynote speeches because I feel more comfortable, you know, that's like you've seen some singers do bare feet, you know, some entertainers, and I think even Steve Jobs, didn't he go bare feet sometimes? I think, I don't know, or where he didn't wear socks or something. I don't remember. But anyway, my point was, if a company hired me and said, no, Ted, you know, we want you to wear a shirt and tie because I don't wear those, a shirt and tie and a suit to do your presentation or your keynote in front of my people, then I would say, I'm not the person you want. So that's the difference in how to discern whether it's time to do TED fully or to partially do TED so you don't harm the environment, the people around you. Does that make
Right,
sense?
right. I'm going to analyze, and as what we do very well, that we're able to follow a thought and we can go very deep into it. Um, and and that's why my conversation with you never ends, and we
You know, we've
can,
been up till 3 in the morning
yeah,
sometimes, 3 or 4 in
yeah,
the morning. Yeah.
exactly. So when you just said that doing TED, let me get back to back it up and to analyze further. According to Spinoza, and this is one of the goals, though. I mean, the thing is, for my research or for the person who I am, um, I say that I grew up with a lot of dead men and women. So what I mean to say that I've been mentored by people who have gone long time ago, because I grew up in abject poverty. I grew up in places where, um, for me, books were the only way to make sense of, or to ask question, or to have a conversation. Like, who do you talk to? Um, so I at one point in my life, I would read and believe, but now I read and see how can I grill it, how can I question it. As I said, nullius in varba, question everything, right? um, so according to Spinoza, people have two emotions: passive emotion and active emotion. Passive emotion, that just happens: rage, hatred, jealousy, envy, all of that, right? It's very animalistic. It's common in every human being.
Hmm.
But then happens, some people, they want to understand them. So the older saying, know thyself, right? They reflect on them. By reflecting on them, they're able to understand others. That's why it's so important to reflect, right? So your model speaks to, and I will show you the connection, that how your model is so richly ingrained in indigenous teaching, how it is ingrained in Buddhist teaching, Eastern teaching, and I'll show you the references. Western knowledge comes from a place of hubris. Western knowledge claims to be objective, claims to be rational, that you, as a rational knower, can look at the nature or what you're looking at you're observing, and you can look at the reality objectively, as if me, as a living, breathing subject, I don't have biases, my filters, I don't have lenses that I look through. So that's and that was one of the very devastating consequences of the history of humanity, colonialism, that the white man went out in the world and said, I know what is right. So they used their knowing. And Ted, I want you to focus on this. They used their confidence or their claim on knowing to decimate, to destroy. And that continues. But in
And
what's,
remember, it also wasn't just white men. That's a farther.
yeah,
A lot of black, brown, and black men
yeah,
did the
yeah,
same
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah,
Human beings,
yeah, yeah. Let's.
human beings, just naturally.
Yeah,
And this is the thing, though. And I love you for asking that question. That it's not only white men. No, it's just that the legacy that we're living right now is the white man's devastation is the most immediate.
100% agreed.
Yeah.
100%.
But if I go back to the history where I come from, no, we're not the peace loving, Om saying no, no. I mean, you go to any. Here's the thing, though, and this is what I love about science, though. But I love science as a methodology, not as a belief, not as a belief, as a methodology. Science as a methodology is a process of knowing what we don't know gradually. What I know today might change tomorrow, and I'll say, well, I have found new evidences that says that what I know is not right.
Yeah,
You,
I say never say never.
yeah, yeah, right, right, right. So I give this example to my kids, that two Nobel laureate physicists, father and son. Father got the Nobel Prize proving that light is a particle, and son got Nobel Prize proving that light is a wave. So now we know in quantum physics that light is both particle and wave. So claiming to know absolute truth, claiming to know that what I know is final, that's it, that is it, makes us tremendously cruel. What do you think about it?
Oh, 100%. I mean, that's the difference between, so the law of cooperative action.
Hmm.
When I developed it over the 4 years at Brock University, I
Hmm.
I started looking around at the world
Mhm.
and at nature
Mhm.
and at animals and all
Mhm.
of those sorts of things,
Mhm.
everything works.
Mhm.
If you look at the trees and the earth and how, what is it called, photosynthesis and everything else like that that goes around, and I'm not near a scientist,
Mhm.
but when I look around and you look at the clouds and everything works, right?
Mhm.
And then you placed us human beings on the earth, or we evolved from the animals that made it work
Mhm.
into this thing. And as soon
Mhm.
as we became sentient beings,
Right.
all of a sudden we
Mhm.
start thinking, oh, we're
Mhm.
superior and separate from everything else.
Mhm.
And I think we both read the same books,
Right.
Sapiens.
I was looking for that book in
You
my
were looking,
shelf.
you were looking up there. Yeah, we read the book Sapiens, and there's
Mhm.
another book I read called The Most Dangerous Animal on the
You
Planet.
introduced me to that book, and I interviewed him 3 times. He has written 11 books.
Yeah,
It's one of the most crucial books I have read and humbling. Can you
yeah.
talk about that book a little bit?
Yeah, well, again, the whole thing is that if
Mhm.
you look at the destruction and where we are today with climate change, and it's funny, you see some things that where, oh, we got to kill the bears are now into suburbia. No, we're in their land. We've encroached on the bears' living habitat, and now
Mhm.
they're coming to us, and now we're mad at them. No,
Mhm.
we encroached on them, right? And no, we are, and until we learn that,
Mhm.
until we learn that we are part of this interconnected, interdependent world. COVID has proven how interconnected we are. Oh my
Mhm.
God. I think that should have been a wake up call to humans instead of fighting conspiracy theories about it. A wake up call that this little drop went all around the world, and it affected not just Asia, not just the US, not just Canada, not the world.
Mhm.
And it still is. And I have to tell you this, it's not the first. It's not the first.
Mhm.
And we need to wake up to that fact that it's not the first. And
Mhm.
so when we became sentient beings and we thought we were superior to anything and everybody else, and then we could have probably a whole discussion on how man created God,
Mhm.
and that is a man made phenomenon, because
Mhm.
we needed to understand, oh my God, it's raining on us. Who created that? Why is that happening?
Mhm.
And then we created it. And again, we can talk about that and the
Mhm.
spark and spiritualism and all that, of
Mhm.
course.
Mhm. Mhm.
But the point is that it still baffles my mind.
Mhm. Ted, one of the things I meant to say it in the very beginning of our conversation is I would really want to continue this conversation between you and me um, as freely as possible, like I really as freely as possible. Um, of all the things that, and I'm probably it's very selfish of me to say it, but I'm going to say it so that in all disclaimer, um, I don't have a lot of friends that I can stay up till 3 a.m. in the morning and engage in very deep conversation. Um, and I'm not. People think I'm extrovert. Actually, I'm not extrovert. I'm extrovert when it is necessary. I need a lot of time to think, to reflect, to write, to be by myself. So I have lived a life just like a double life. If you look at the first, all the jobs that I've done as a guidance counselor, as a teacher, as a community organizer, it was extremely people oriented, organized people, etc. Um, but I get tired. I get tired, so I need to um, retrieve back and reflect. So my selfish piece here is this: if not anybody, I want our I want at least my kids to know that um, how their father thought, you know, how things that he encountered, and to engage in a deep conversation like you. As I said, I don't have a lot of, but also the transient nature of life. I talk about it to probably all my friends that An American cultural anthropologist in his deathbed in Canada wrote a book. Actually, it was a conversation that became a book. It's called The Denial of Death. And I think it answers, it perfectly fits in what you were just saying, that, why we created the ideas of
Yeah,
this God or this belief or that belief. Um, in the book, The Denial of Death, Becker argues that humans are the only creature who consciously, unconsciously are painfully aware about their death, about their
sure.
mortality. Because we are so acutely aware of our mortality, it creates death anxiety in us.
That's right.
And what that death anxiety does, it does not let us rest. So then we find ourselves against the forces of nature, that look at tsunami, look at tornado, look at climate change, look at the raging fire, wildfire, and how helpless we feel against those mighty powers of nature. And then we need to create a story, a narrative that will tell us that, okay, I got your back, right? But, and this is where I find my research to be so fulfilling to me, is that I found out that both science and religion, they were originated from the same place. What is that same place? Both science and spirituality, religion, wanted to understand what does it mean to be human in the midst of not knowing pretty much everything. We don't know. Science wants to know. But what happened, what initially started as a spirituality became organized religion. And I want you to push me back if you think that, in my thought, there are fallacies there. And that's why we are trusting friends. We are able
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
ask each other most uncomfortable question. that, I mean, um, so spirituality is a tradition that tells us that I don't understand me in its entirety. And it tells us about the possibility. Spirituality is that humility of knowing that I don't know. But I know that what I am as a physical being, there is also a being, a side of me that is not physical, that is metaphysical. So I am the combination of the body and mind, how the Western knowledge tradition has separated body and mind. But if you look at from Buddhist tradition, if you look at indigenous tradition, they will tell you, no, 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 no. Your intellect, your spirituality, your physical being, these are all connected. It's just one thing. So when you say interdependence, when you say that life of river, when you say law of cooperative action, in my head, my research tells me that, oh, yeah, Ted is talking about a thing that the indigenous people have been saying for millennia, which is relationality.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, indigenous people say that tree, and you give the perfect example, COVID, just one pandemic. It showed that how interconnected we are, how interdependent we are. But the indigenous people have been saying that, hey, the bear, the moose, the earth, the nature, they're giving you gift. You are part of that family.
That's right.
You are part of the gift economy, not the ownership economy and all that we think now, right? So I want us to be very open and not very structured. Like, see, spontaneity. We can
Well,
be spontaneous with most people, right?
well, the thing is, this conversation's already gone in about 5 different directions, and
Hmm,
what the listeners don't know, or the viewers,
hmm.
we have not scripted anything.
Yeah,
We just
yeah,
started talking, and that's
hmm,
the way all of our sessions are gonna be, the ones that
yeah,
we're gonna be posting,
yeah,
is we don't know where this is going,
yeah,
and then at a certain time, we're gonna say, "Okay, we've had enough, they're falling asleep over there,
yeah, yeah.
and so we've gotta get off the air."
Hmm,
But I agree, this is how our conversations always have happened, and I think this is the way most friends and intellects talk.
hmm,
And we start a conversation and it goes over here, then it goes over there, and it goes over there. Sometimes we need to take a note and say, oh, by the way, that point we made 15 minutes ago, I want to get back to it because we didn't finish that thought, which is okay. So this is the way life is too. You know, we get up in the morning and we say, well, we're going to do it today, and then all of a sudden the car breaks down. Or, you know, we get a pimple where we don't want one, or, you know, something happens. So life is not that. Life is fluid. And we need to understand that life is fluid. But when we get into this whole concept of how we believe we can control everything, and the death, you know, I've got, you've seen this, I've got a tattoo. It says, I stand softly in my knowing. I stand softly in my knowing. I wrote that. And the whole point is, I know who Ted is. I know what Ted believes. I stand softly in that. The people who yell and scream most about that are the ones who are not comfortable about who they are, what they believe, or what they know, because they have to overshadow that other person. You've heard me say this many times. I use this as an easy analogy because I am looking. I know I told you I'm going to write another book, and I think I've got the working title is "This Journey Simple, We Complicate It." And so you've heard me use this analogy. If I want to put ketchup in my coffee, that's my business. My business isn't to force you to put ketchup in your coffee, nor is your business to stop me from putting ketchup in my coffee. Now, we can both have good, robust discussions about ketchup in the coffee. You could say, Ted, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of, putting ketchup in your coffee. That's really dumb. That's your opinion, that's your belief, that's your way of being. So we can get people to think that simply, that we don't need to force other people to do what we like. For every religion and every belief, even Buddhism, indigenous, I think everybody should think about adding these two words on the back of whatever their belief is. Those two words are, this is what God means this for me, or for me. This is good for me. This is what I believe for me. This is what I'm eating my diet because it's good for me. Instead of trying to force other people to do the same thing. So.
Right. I think so. I think there you brought a very critical point. You know, so some of the points that we can take and we can tease apart to get at the bottom of it. So if I put ketchup in my coffee, and is it possible that when we see people doing things that does not fit within my belief system, I can get triggered?
That's right. Exactly.
And I may not have the self-awareness. I may not, and again, I'm going to bring in references to substantiate your writings and your arguments. So Marshall McLuhan, a Canadian philosopher who literally first coined the term global village, and he is prominent in so many ways. One of the things he was so prescient about when he talked about globalization, he said that globalization is not essentially about the movement of products, that goods are going from America to Montenegro. Not necessarily. What he prophesied, that globalization is that when information will flow through a global network of electronic structure, through electronic structure, televisions. At that time, obviously, we didn't have internet, but that instantaneous transfer of information. And what is going to happen, that we will see that people are coming in contact, not essentially physically, but with ideas, with beliefs. And Marshall McLuhan foresaw what we are experiencing now. And what happens when all the ideas come together? What happens? Some ideas are strong, powerful, because they are backed by more economic, military, political power, culturally dominant. Like, for example, think about United States going to a country because they're there, or even think about the language. I mean, English is just a language. Why is it so dominant? It's not because the language intrinsically in itself, is that who speak it,
That's right.
right? So Marshall McLuhan foresaw that when these ideas are going to come in contact, what is going to happen? It's going to, and this is what McLuhan's genius. McLuhan saw that people will feel that their identity is threatened, and he foresaw that when people's identity is threatened, people become violent,
That's right.
because identity is the ground beneath our feet. And when we realize that the ground beneath our feet is shifting, and I'm standing on something that is not, then what happens? I Because who am I then? Not everybody has the appetite to go into the zone where they are figuring out. When you say, it's easy for you to say, Ted, that I know softly in my knowing that you are comfortable in your skin, but most people, most of us, we are not comfortable in our skin. Why?
Well, that's because we're trying to make, as you said, you
Mm,
said it perfectly. We're trying to make us the center. Like we're not sure. We need to exert
mhm,
our our selfness, if
mhm,
that's a word, our
mhm,
selfness
mhm.
in order. And I noticed that above my head in the corner there, that, oh, I'm pointing the wrong way.
Mhm.
We have the H there that we stylize
Yeah,
based on my
yeah.
rainbow metaphor. So
Mhm,
when, and this happens in all relationships, but it doesn't happen in nature.
mhm,
It doesn't happen in animal kingdom necessarily. I mean, there are
mhm,
dominance and servience
mhm.
there, but
Right.
the point being is that a one rose doesn't tell the other rose what color that rose should be, right?
Right.
It's just, they
Mhm,
both bloom together
mhm,
in the garden. So
mhm,
the rainbow metaphor, if I can bring that in, is in relationship, because that's what we're talking about. Everything is relationship. Relationship with your clothes, relationship with your hair, your glass, everything's a relationship. So whether it's business relationship, friendship relationship, or love relationship,
mhm,
even fourth, relationship with the planet, relationship with animals and everything else. So when the red comes together with the yellow to form the orange, the relationship, there must be a vibrant red, a vibrant yellow to make a vibrant orange, the relationship. Our problem as humans is the red keeps telling the yellow what color the yellow should be based on the red's perception of yellow, not the yellow's perception of itself.
mhm,
Therefore, it taints the orange, which is
mhm.
the relationship, and the relationship breaks down, conflict occurs.
Right. So one of the goals that I have of this conversation, I apologize to Ted personally, but I'm apologizing here, is that these conversations are extremely important to me. But as a doctoral researcher, somebody who is on payroll doing research work, anybody doing doctoral work would tell you that takes it just takes so much of your thought, like your waking hours. And I do it because I enjoy it, not because I am obligated. What I am doing here at the University of Guelph, if I was just and by the way, Ted, I am a Canadian citizen now. I probably have told you already, right?
I know you
uh,
did. That was great. I remember when we were doing your landed immigrant, and we had
yeah,
I helped because we had to drive outside, and come back again, and all that stuff. That was a
yeah,
fun
yeah,
day. That was a
yeah.
fun day.
Yeah, I have so many critical moments of my life. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to share everything here because of the respecting of confidentiality of other people who are involved with your life. But in so many moments of crisis, so many moments of triumph, I've been Ted was there,
Thank you.
uh, and
Really
make
appreciate
and break, and ups and downs. So as one of the things that I hope to do is all the things that I have learned from you. I also want to draw the connection with all the existing bodies of knowledge that is out there already, so that someday A university can use your work as a coursework. Someday, a university can, or someday, and as you and I have a plan already, that we can get a transcript out of this and we can write together. So, a possibility. Um, what you just said in terms of uh, Red's perception of YOLO and YOLO's perception of Red and the conflict. And here is what um, the systems thinker will tell you. Now, who are the systems thinker? In 1972, a group of researchers from MIT, um, led by Jay Forrester, the guy who actually developed Raider, the guy who developed RAM of computer. So he's the guy who developed the systems thinking and systems dynamics. What you say interconnectedness, what indigenous people say relationality. At MIT, they came out with a report that is known as the limits to growth, where they said that human perception of the nature is so human centric. The fancy word is anthropocentric, that we believe in lies, like blatant lies. How so? There is no limits to growth. But the planet, the resources we are taking, the indigenous ways of being, of taking resources from the nature, is that you are in a relationship with the nature. If the nature becomes sick, you will become sick. If the climate is changing, you will not be able to survive. Look what is happening. The planet is literally on fire. Like what happened in Hawaii? About, I think, 170 to 80 people died. I
And
mean,
I've been to Lahaina, and that banyan tree, you had to be there to see it. It is priceless. 150-year-old tree. I'm glad
yeah,
it survived.
yeah,
But yeah.
yeah. So it's literally, and I've read a book. It's called The Sweetgrass, where the author Kimmerer, Professor Kimmerer, an indigenous scholar, she talks about something called Wendigo mindset. Wendigo. Wendigo is a monster in indigenous mythology, but this monster is not born, it is made. This monster in each of us, this monster creates a kind of condition in us that it feeds the emptiness. The more we feed, and this is why your project is so important, Ted. This is why your work, your model is so important. The Human Skills Project. We think that I've learned driving recently. So, I mean, I still haven't got my G. So, when
Well,
I
when you
drive,
actually get your full drive, I'll stay off the road myself.
so when I drive, I know that it doesn't matter how good I drive if the person who is driving next to me is not a good driver. He can jeopardize his security as well as my security. So you and I are driving on the highway of life, blindfolded, with our fellow passengers, meaning our children, our family members, because I'm in the driving seat and I'm blindfolded, I'm on highway, and I'm crashing, breaking, and bruising myself, hurting my family members, hurting people that I love, and I'm saying, why am I hurting? So that's where the Human Skills Project comes, saying that living is a skill that you have to learn.
Well, it's like you mentioned, and I'm not sure I'm going with your blindfolded analogy, because in my model, I take the whole blindfold off.
Yeah,
And the thing is that you mentioned the stream a few times.
yeah,
So let's bring that into the conversation.
yeah.
We're all in the same stream, the river of life. Call it
Right.
whatever you want. We're not in separate
Mm,
streams,
mm,
and COVID again has proved that.
mm,
Our problem and our conflict and
mm,
our need and want to dominate,
mm,
we keep wanting to try to control the stream.
mm,
You can't. And as you just said in your analogy, you can't control that driver in the other car. You have
mm,
no idea what that driver is going to do.
mm,
And so the idea of trying to control the stream or control that river of life, you can't.
mm,
Can you affect it? Yes, of course you can affect it. How you walk into a room with a smile, how you look at your place at this time in this place in the planet, yes, you can affect walking into a room, whether you're miserable, you're happy, or whatever. And someone said my effect is neutral. No, it isn't. There's only, in my mind anyway, there's only positive or negative. There's no neutral. Because if you walk into a room and people go, that's not a positive, that's not a neutral, right? But if you walk into a room, people have told me many times, and I get humbled by this in a way. And I think this happens to you too, because you have a presence about you. When I walk into a room, I change the room. I change the room because of the energy I bring. So I can affect the stream, but I can't control the stream. What I can do, the only thing I can do, is control how I act and react to what the stream is giving me, keeping in mind not to harm the stream. More importantly, don't allow the stream to harm me. So it's about being in control without being controlling. And that's the analogy I use all the time, and you've used it several times. You know, this stream is there. I don't know where it's going to take me this moment. When we finish this podcast, I have no idea what's going to happen this afternoon. I have a plan on what I need to do and some shopping I need to do and those sorts of things, but I don't know where that's going. And you see, that's what I love about being alive at this moment in time with my brain questioning what's going on, accepting what's going on, but also being in control because we all have choices. I can, I'm not being here because I'm obligated to be here. Louise Fletcher said it this way: I'm doing what I should have done years ago, which is to find out who I am and what I want. I want to make decisions through choice, not duty. It has to be better for me, the people who love me, and the people I love. And we've had these conversations because of your background, and how you were obligated at many points, and we still have to care about family, but more obligated than you needed to be, if I may bring that up. Then you finally realized, wait a minute, I can do this, but on my terms, not on your terms. I live my journey doing TED on my terms, not on anybody else's terms. Keeping in
Right,
mind,
right,
not to
right,
harm
right.
anybody, right?
So when you say stream, and I want to bring us back to your analogy, particularly when you were saying you cannot control the stream,
Correct.
means you are in the stream of life. And help me if I let me see if I got this right. You are in the stream of life with every other existence of the stream of life. Now, to me, that sounds like a systems thinking. Now, what is a systems thinking? In 72, a bunch of scientists, they say that how in planet Earth, everything is connected to everything. When we try to understand something, we take apart and we just want to try to understand that part. And we change it, we do some kind of thing, but we don't think about, after changing that part, what is going to be the ripple effect, how it is going to change the stream of life. So what just Ted said, you can affect the stream. However, we also grow with a very destructive mindset that I can control the stream.
That's right. And that's when we get upset. Like when you get
Mhm,
upset with traffic, somebody else,
mhm,
your partner. I can't believe you're wearing that today. You
mhm,
should change. You're trying to control the stream. Oh, you
mhm,
shouldn't eat that. You're trying to control the stream.
mhm,
You know, but the key is I can't control the stream,
mhm,
but I'm 100% in control on how I navigate the stream.
mhm,
And
mhm,
that means sometimes pulling over to
mhm,
the dock and
mhm,
resting. As you said, you need time for yourself to
mhm,
reflect, to recharge.
mhm,
But I can choose what form of navigation I want, need,
mhm,
or the
mhm,
stream.
mhm. So here comes what you said in the beginning of our conversation, that people are, I don't think, at least my experience of being a teacher and a community organizer, I can tell you that most people believe that they don't have a choice.
Agreed, 100%. They settle. And that
Yeah.
infuriates me that people are settling
Mhm.
and not being their true
Mhm.
self.
Mhm. Here is the thing: in order to be the true self, Jean Paul Sartre talked about an idea, it's called mauvaise foi, bad faith. Let's say, and he talks about this waiter who is serving the food, and then he says that, look at this waiter. Maybe he doesn't like his job, but he is being a waiter in its entirety, the way he talks, the way he walks, the way he serves. And when in his waking hour, let's say he's contemplating on the struggles of his life, then he says, well, I'm being a waiter because I don't have any other choice. I have to pay bills, I have this and that obligations and responsibilities, and what have you. So what happens that he becomes the prisoner of his bad fate. And Sartre says, yeah, go on.
Yeah, yeah. But
Hmm.
if he chooses
Hmm.
to be the waiter, the best waiter in the world, his
Yeah.
whole life changes.
Yeah. So there is go. There's
So
nothing wrong with
he's
being a
not a
waiter.
prisoner. He's
Yeah.
only a prisoner if he believes he's a prisoner.
Right, right, right. So there's nothing wrong being
That's
a
right.
waiter if that is what, because everybody has a yearning self in them. Everybody, like inside them. And this is one of the mistakes that I have done in my life that I recognize, and I tell my children, that that was a mistake that I have done. I was always in love with academia, with research, reflect, reading. I don't know if I didn't know that it was going to be a PhD program. Even if I didn't do a PhD program, like when I was working 3 years in Toronto to get my citizenship, um, I was reading. It's like I was reading voraciously. I was reading. I mean, I
I
was.
I
Yeah.
remember trying to get. I remember those days because when I knew you were an academic all your life, when I
Mm,
first met you, and when you first got a job in the real world out of
yeah.
academia, you were like a fish out of water. I remember you called me and said, "These people, Ted, these people," And I said, "Welcome to the real world. Welcome to what humanity really is." Because academia sometimes has not a clue what reality is.
Yeah. Uh, there are so many areas of academia that is devoid of reality, and I'm saying it operating within the academic space, right? um, Academia a lot of the times aspires to an ideal world, but the world is not ideal. The world is a precarious place where things keep changing all the time. So what I did mistake is, because I love reading, writing, reflecting, I wanted my younger siblings, because as I'm the first member in my family to go to university, I kind of forced them to become good in studies.
Right.
Go study, because my way of out of poverty, out of starvation was studies. That's it. Scholarship, do well in academia. That's how I got out of poverty and brought my family out of poverty to the best of my ability. So I thought that is the route for my younger siblings. I thought that is the route for my nephew and nieces. And in the process, I came to realize no,
That's right.
everybody.
You were putting your own belief and grooming into
Hmm.
them.
Right, 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 right. And I regret. Obviously, at that time, and that it is also taken from the model. Your model is that when people are doing something, in their mind, they genuinely think that they're right.
That's right. So even though when you said you use the word mistake, I don't use the word mistake because at
Mm,
your time
mm,
you believed you were right.
mhm,
You know, Bin Laden believed he was right. Trump believes he's right. Everybody who does whatever they do believe they're right. That's why
mm,
in the model you don't fight them. You just neutralize their effect on you. The
mhm,
stream is going in its direction. It believes it's right.
mhm,
Nature takes its course. It's doing what it believes inherently it does, right?
mhm,
So
mhm.
all we can do is neutralize the effect on us. Now,
Right.
as long as you're doing something, which I know you as a person,
mm,
in a good way. The natives
mhm,
always use the term in a good way.
mhm,
Or sorry, indigenous. If you're doing it in a good way, then
mhm.
you can't fault yourself. But what I teach in the model is I would say, not you should be doing this. Here's what I would do if I was you
Mhm.
at this stage in your life. You can take it or
Right,
leave it.
right, right,
So if they are bent towards academia, they're going to say, whoa, yes, that sounds good. Not, this Feroz
mhm,
guy is forcing me to become a scholar.
right,
Right.
right, right.
So that's the difference. And controlling the stream again, you're
Yeah,
not controlling that.
yeah. And I think later when I realized it, and I realized that I was imposing my yearning of learning, researching, knowing onto people who were at the time either were dependent on me or they look up to me. Now I tell my three kids that find out, Henry David Thoreau, find out what is your drum. Like everybody, there is a drum in you that's everyone's drum is not beating for the same march. It's a different march. Like that there's something. So, like for example, my oldest son, he does graphics design. He says that he wants to become some kind of cybersecurity expert or some computer stuff. In the beginning he wanted to do graphics design. Now he's doing programming. And all the thing that I do, I tell him. The other thing is that I think fathers do a mistake. Sorry.
No, that's all
What was
right.
the what was the term you said? Like at that time, say doing what we do, thinking that is the best we know at the time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
right.
I think you came very honest to your kids saying that who you are as a person.
Well, I think too is I didn't realize this till because
Mm,
even if we don't use the words or press,
mm,
I remember my one younger daughter was in
mm,
one of my seminars, and
mm,
it was during a question and answer, and she pointed out, she says, you changed my life one day, and I said, like, why? And she said, you came to me at around age 15 and said, so what do you want to do? What do you want to be? And she says, I don't know. And I said to her, I said, if you want to play guitar on a street corner with a hat down, as long as you're happy, be whatever you want to be. She said that took the pressure off her because I was such a high achiever
mhm,
that she thought, without me pushing it, she had to be the high achiever as well.
mhm,
And so I think we have to be careful as leaders, as
mhm,
parents, as mentors,
mhm,
that we project a way of being of who we are,
mhm,
but also let other people know you can be
mhm,
whoever you want to be. You don't have to be me.
mhm. Yeah, yeah. And I think it is. I
And
think it
that's your
is.
lesson. That's your lesson, right? That you were
Yeah,
that you were trying to get
yeah.
at. Yeah.
I think it is irresponsible not to tell people who look up to you, particularly your children, that this is my drum, this is my music that I'm dancing to. Your music is different.
That's right.
As a parent, all I can do, I can be supportive in you finding your music. That's it. But nobody can find it for you. So when I realized it, I took the path of academia, knowing that's where I thrive, that's where I am myself. I find when I am intensely in the process of writing, not knowing the answer, but I'm looking for answer. But I've developed that appetite of not knowing. I have developed a capacity to embrace with humility the fact that I don't know. Hence the saying that nullius in verba.
Hmm.
So I think a lot of parents appear in front of their kids infallible, appear in front of the kids that they are the sources of all strengths, all the solutions of their life is within their possibility. And what happens, the kids start believing in that fiction that they're more than mother father figures portray, that I got everything under me, I got all the answers. I And then what happens, they look up to their father And at one point in life, they realize, oh, my father wasn't right. So that illusion crumbles. And when it does, it profoundly affects the kids. You know that some kids grow up believing in Santa, and one day they realize there is no Santa,
That's right.
and that's a rude awakening. It's not good. It's not good. So
But we perpetuate those myths, don't we?
yeah, yeah. Well,
Because that's
why do we do that, Ted? Why do we perpetuate those myths?
because those myths are what we. I've often said uh, we need to start questioning, like, why do we do what we do? That's
Yeah.
part of my research. Why do we
Hmm.
do what we do?
Hmm.
And I use the terminology, because parents argue with their kids
Hmm.
about take your hat off indoors. It's respect. Take your hat, at least Western culture. Take your hat off indoors. And so I started saying, so you take your hat off indoors. No, that has nothing to do with respect. It
Hmm.
has to do with the fact in the old days, and why do we shake with our right hand? Because that was the weapon hand. You would shake with your weapon hand. Why do you take your hat off? You had a helmet. You would show who you are. Plus, you had something in this hand to show you didn't have something behind. So what we don't do is we don't analyze why there. Here's the story I just remembered that I want to share with you. The child says to the parents putting a roast in the oven. Why do we cut the ends off the roast? Parent says we cut. That's what we do. We cut the ends off the roast. My mother taught me how to cut the ends off the roast. So go ask grandma. He goes ask grandma. Says, grandma, why do we cut the ends off the roast? That's something we do. We cut the ends off the roast. That's what I was taught by my mother. By the way, if you ask somebody a question and they start yelling at you back or raise their voice, they don't know the answer.
Right, right, right.
So then she would go to great grandma sitting in the corner. Great grandma, why do you cut the ends off the roast? Oh, that's simple. Back in the old days, we were very poor. We only had one pan and it was too small.
Hmm.
So, what we do is we do something we were taught to do. Men have to wear pants, women wear dresses. Why? Let's switch it around. We have to eat breakfast a certain way, lunch a certain way, dinner a certain way. Forks you have to use a certain way. You can't use your hands, depending on your culture. And we're brought up to believe, and it makes me laugh today when I hear all of the fundamentalist thinkers trying to talk about trans and drag queens grooming. We all groom. Every culture grooms. You groom your children to be your clone. You groom your children to be what you believe is the only way to be, which is very destructive to society, by only believing that this is. And I heard, I forget which philosopher, but he said the only reason you believe the religion you believe is because of the where you were born. It's as simple as that. If you were born in Bangladesh, you believe this. If you were born in Canada, you believe this. That's not the best. It's and so then we perpetuate that to the next generation and the next generation instead of saying this is what I believe. This is good for me. Go out and search around. We can't do that because if someone comes up with something that stops our belief system or destroys our belief system, we don't know who we are. And I'm sure you have a philosopher that talks about that. We don't know who we are. Now, the difference between Eastern culture and Western culture, in my mind, Western culture, especially Christians and Christianity, and I'll go to Islam and Muslims, we've separated our God from us in generally. That's why I can tell a joke about Jesus or about God or something, and no one's going to try to cut my head off. But Islam is still of a point, again, this is mine, that their religion and Allah is them. So when you insult that, you insult me because I am that, that is me. And it's very hard, very difficult for people.
Right,
Uh,
right. So let me uh, give further insight into that. So it is true that in the Western liberal democracy, they needed to separate church from the state. They needed to separate. Okay. but it has a very uh, traceable history that there was a directly discernible political economy behind it. Now, what was it? Bruno was burned at the stake, an Italian philosopher and mathematician. What did he do? He said, well, the Earth is not the center of the universe. It's heliocentric. He said what he said,
Mhm.
and the church burned him at the stake.
Of course. Hypocrisy, heresy. That's it. Yeah.
Heresy, exactly. Yeah. Copernicus led a very difficult life. So, what happened in Europe? Uh, a very prominent economic historian, Joel Mokyr, talks about it, the culture of growth. That what was unique about Europe, that it grew so successful in its conquest of empires. Not that the Europeans are the only empires in the history; the other empires too. So, what was unique about Europe? So, two things. A, uh, Europe came to realize this nullius in verba. That is written in the British Royal Society Gate, that take no one's word for it. Why? Because you see, if we did not realize that Earth is not at the center of the universe, if we did not understand heliocentric system of the planet, we would not be able to float satellite in the orbit. We would not have a GPS system. You cannot think about the modern economy without this scientific invention. It is not possible. Nada, not gonna happen. Not
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah.
So in Europe, what was happening, that their economic growth was happening. Church had a lot of power, but the business realized that without developing navigation system, without developing weapon system, without developing all these scientific advancements, we cannot make profit, we cannot make money. So business institutions started supporting, and here is the uniqueness here, is that they started supporting men of letters. At that time, men of letters like anybody. And so I forgot the reference where they created a state, like literally a country, where only men of letters will be the citizen. Means if you are a practitioner of knowledge,
Right.
if you are somebody who is searching knowledge, you will be supported. So if in one European country you said, the earth is not at the center of the universe, the state wants to prosecute you, you can go to another country of the Europe and they will back you up. So Europe rose to its supremacy because they changed their god from church to science. And here's the part. Europe also placed God at the foundation of science that can be traced back directly. You can find out so many scientific progress that literally builds on the Christian theology that is not backed by science. And I will tell you heartbreaking stories of Charles Darwin. Without Darwin, we don't have a modern biology.
That's right.
Without Darwin, I cannot be absolutely sure that your difference with me in skin color is one of the silliest and, dare I say, stupidest of difference. You see what I mean? So there are only less than 300 genes. Human beings have 6 billion genes. Less than 300 genes that makes the distinction in color. Your gene and my genetic makeup can be closer. You're a white man. I'm not a white man. Your and my genetic makeup can be closer than another Bangladeshi man that I have in Bangladesh.
Yeah.
So we are not different.
No, I know.
So the idea of race is not biological, it's social. It
That's
is
right.
stupidly social. White man is not superior. So as the brown man. Brown man is not superior. That is crazy. But look, see what has happened. The stupid, arrogant, narcissistic, insecure group of people took science and they misused it. How did they misuse it? Darwin, at the time when he was writing, in his ignorance, now here's the thing, I'm not putting Darwin in the altar of God. Darwin is a human being, hence
Yeah.
fallible. Darwin wrote in his book, The Ascent of Man, is that he believes that the superior race will exterminate the inferior race, not at a very long time. So Darwin knew that we have evolved, and he had undeniable evidence for that. Now it is evidenced by genetic. I mean, it's like this. Some people believe the Earth is flat. So if you say that evolution is not true, it's just like that. It's not. It's a reality. But Darwin himself had ignorance. He thought that the skin color of European men makes them superior. So in his book, The Ascent of Man, he writes that he fears that in the near future, the superior race will exterminate the inferior race. Was he right?
In a lot of places, he was.
He was right.
Not,
Okay.
and not superior,
Yeah,
just arrogant race of white
right. Exactly. So
men.
I need to understand Darwin, that he was a seeker of knowledge who was trying to get to something that he doesn't understand. But people have taken his work and has established entirely a fictitious realm of hierarchy that puts white people at the pinnacle, and so see what it has gotten us.
Yeah, a white, perceived Christian,
Yeah,
perceived athletic,
right.
heterosexual, perceived
Yeah,
all of
yeah,
that stuff.
yeah.
That reminds me of a story of the
Mm,
missionary
mm,
and the native.
mhm,
So the native said to the missionary, "So let me understand this. If I didn't know about sin and
mm,
I sinned,
mm,
would I go to heaven?" And the missionary said, "Of course you would. You would be like an innocent child. You would bypass judgment
mm,
if you didn't know about sin." So
mhm.
the native said, "Then why are you telling me these things?" Yeah,
Mm,
me and the tree god are fine. Get out of my village. Look
yeah.
around the village. There's no jail. Everybody's being fed. Get out of my
Mm,
village.
mhm,
Oh, you just don't like that our women go around topless
mhm,
and that we're having sex with our friends and our brother. You know, like,
mhm.
sorry, get out of
Yeah,
my village,
yeah, yeah.
right?
So what has happened in all this three religion, monotheistic religion, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all this idea. So where we started off in terms of saying is that humans are painfully aware about their mortality. It creates a death anxiety in them. And by the way, this is Ernest Becker's book, Denial of Death, where he writes that the death anxiety in us creates a universal hero drive. We want to accomplish something, like Alexander wanted to conquer the world, Hitler wanted to create a pure race, and look where it had gotten us.
Believe the legacy so next generation knows we were here,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
exactly. So that comes from, and I would say, dare I say it, if you want to understand, that comes from a rather delicate place. That comes from a place of helplessness. Is that I know that I'm going to be gone. I'm not going to be in this world. So I want to leave a legacy by exterminating, destroying planet, or I don't know, leave some kind of mark. Like, but it comes from a place of helplessness. You see what I mean?
Yeah, but I also think a place of ignorance too, because when we start when the industrial age became and we
Mm,
started doing this and doing that, I remember I go back long enough to we were using paper bags
mhm,
and glass bottles,
mhm,
and we said, "Oh, paper bags are cutting down, or too many trees. We're destroying the planet." So someone
mhm,
invented plastic.
mhm,
Look where we are today.
mhm,
So I think in some instances our progression as a humanity initially was this is good for us,
mhm,
but it also did not turn out as good as we thought it was going to be. And I
mhm,
know the discussion we're going to get on this one time, and not necessarily today, but AI, it's good for us, but ultimately could destroy us. You
Mhm.
know, it's so we've got that. I noticed you're wearing the yin and yang, and that is a whole thing we have to always keep in mind
Mhm.
that there is that dual is it duality
Yeah,
duality
yeah, yeah.
that duality of existence. We
Mhm.
have to have suffering to know happiness.
Mhm.
We have to have good to have bad, to know
Mhm.
good and to bad, and all
Mhm.
that stuff. But we don't want that. We want
Mhm.
this. I don't think we'll ever have. One friend asked me, by the way, one friend asked me when COVID was over,
Mhm.
do you think because the planet did sort of come together, except the
Mhm.
2%,
Mhm.
that we are going to become better people?
Mhm.
And I said, no. And he was surprised coming from me. I said, no, there will always be, always in our life, the 2%, whether it's a 2% person or a 2% incident. Even yesterday, tried to start my car, the starter went. It, every day in our life, there'll be a 2% incident or person coming to our lives. It's how we navigate that river of life, that stream, that rock that hits us in the butt. We got,
Right.
yeah,
So I want to, and I want to end this episode here in terms of, so can we focus our next episode of conversation that why humans are the most dangerous animals?
yeah.
And and we'll take it from here. So what happens that every episode we finish, we leave at a point so that the we our conversation flows to the next bit that okay, um, White had said that even after such a devastating pandemic, people will be cruel, and people will be there. Will always be the 2% people, the 2%
Now
factor.
make sure you write that down so we know, because I'm 75. I could forget by then.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I have it down. So that is the end of our this episode. This episode went almost like over hour and 20 minutes, but usually we'll try to wrap every episode an hour. Or what we can do is that we can
Even
record, yeah, 30 minutes each episode. We can do it twice. So um, thank you, Ted, for coming on today and starting the conversation. And we will get to the next episode that why humans will always be humans.
let me leave you with this. It's an exercise I do every night for the viewers, just to get an idea of whether I've had a good day or not, because every one of my days is fantastic. So
Mm,
what you do is you stand up at the end of the day, you put your arms up here, you go like this, and
mm.
then you move all around. And if you didn't feel the sides of a coffin, you've had a good day. The rest is BS. I leave you with that.
Okay. Thank you, Ted.
Bye bye.